Hi, everyone. I'll let everyone find a spot. Welcome. So the art critic, the Pulitzer Prize-winning art critic Jerry Saltz, who I had the pleasure of meeting once at an art show, wrote a book on how to be an artist. And he himself tried to be an artist and then failed, wrote a book about it. And he would say that every time I go to an art gallery, there's all these paintings or sculptures that are made by by artists, and a huge crowd. For one artist, dozens of people come, and they just they look at the art, they look at the crowd, and they all say, "Well, I could be that person. I could have my art up there. I could have this crowd that comes for me. I could be the artist. How can I be one, Jerry?" And I know Jerry would dispense lots of advice of how to be an artist, despite himself being an unsuccessful one. Why am I talking about artists and how to be an artist at a tech talk? What could possibly be common between artists and developers? Well, as far as I'm concerned, making art is the same thing as writing code. To me, I've always used the same part of my brain for both of those things. And in fact, scientific studies have shown that the same side of the brain is used for all creative endeavors, including coding. It's not the math side at all. It's the creative one. Developers that I know that are any good at writing code are very passionate about what they do. And they tend to have the same features of many artists that I know as well. If you go to this art show where the works by an artist are hanging on walls, the artist is rarely there. And that's because they tend to put the work in front and be a little bit antisocial in real life. And so those aspects are extremely similar. If you look at the intersection of between artist, coder, you'll find that that in the middle, there is something very, very special. And that something very special is the desire to make something. It's the inevitable waking up every morning and feeling that today I just have to make it. Art critics will write a lot about art, and they explain in many complicated words with art history of why and what that is. But then you go to the artist and you say, what is this? What is this strange thing that I've never seen? Why did you even make this? And say, I don't know. I just had to. And many developers are similar. So I go by DB. It's an old nickname from the Computer Underground. I polled a number of maintainers of various OpenSearch project repositories, and I asked them a few pieces of advice of how to become a maintainer on one of the OpenSearch projects. So please join me and 30-something maintainers of repositories in the OpenSearch project in this presentation, where we're just going to go through their advice and see what we can learn from that of how to become a maintainer. The first and the best advice that I learned from one of these maintainers is just dive in. You wake up, you want to make something, just go make it. And I love this person's avatar, because that's exactly how I feel. As soon as I decide to make something, the computer just says no. This will be a lot in this presentation. So what does it mean to just dive in? Here's an example of a complicated bug that a user of OpenSearch found. And this was a really nice bug. It's irrelevant what the details of this bug are. But I really like this one because the person here wrote a really good, detailed repro of the steps, and they said, I make this query, and I get this error. Pretty straightforward, and they copy-pasted in nicely formatted format of the layout that we give in the OpenSearch core project, the repro steps. So I said, well, if you have repro steps, you're this closer to actually turning the repro steps into a reproducible test. In OpenSearch core, there is a great feature. These are REST YAML tests. It's as easy as writing a YAML file. And then you type some command that you've never seen before, and it will run the test. And in the test, you say, this is the query I get. This is the response I would like to get back. The thing works. But this one gives an error. So this test, these exact 20 lines of YAML, are actually failing. And so now the person who wrote this bug actually wrote a test that is failing. And I love it. I just said, well, now that you have a repro in code of the problem, maybe you can find where the bug is. Like, how do I do that? Well, you said it worked in OpenSearch 2.12. It doesn't work in OpenSearch 2.13. So bisect it down to the place where it broke. This was a regression. The user already tried the previous version. It worked. Tried the new version. It didn't work. And they were like, what is bisect? I've never heard of this thing. So bisect is a really silly tool. It's something that Git has. And what it does, it says, run the test that you just wrote against the current version of the code. And if it fails, say this is a bad point in time. Then go back a few revisions. So when we shipped OpenSearch 2.12, you rewind the code to OpenSearch 2.12, run the same test. Does it succeed? It succeeds. This is a good place and time. And then say bisect continue. And bisect just picks a revision in the middle and says, here, I got the code in the state in the middle. Run the test again. You run the test, like with the monkey repeating the same command, and it says, oh, it failed again. OK, this is a bad one. So it says somewhere between the last good one and this bad one, it broke. Let me pick the thing in the middle. Picks the thing in the middle. Monkey run the test again. I run the test again. This was a good one, etc. And it narrows it down till it's got one change. And now this person who's never written a test, who's never written the who only had a use OpenSearch situation, they found the actual commit where the problem was. Like, well, you found the commit. You should be able to fix it now. This is, exactly what there is. They're like, yes, if I revert the commit, the error goes away. I'm like, OK, this is a start. This is probably the easiest way to fix the problem, revert the commit. But that commit fixed something else. So let's find a way where we can actually understand what's in the code and then actually fix the problem. And you know what? That person went ahead and actually dug through it and fixed the error that came. And so they became a first-time contributor to OpenSearch Core. And that's how they got started. They just dove in and step by step walked through this process and became a committer to OpenSearch. Amazing. Now, you don't have to go and contribute to OpenSearch Core. OpenSearch Core is like 1 billion lines of code. It's written by tons of very smart people. It's super complicated. It's got the YAML tests by the thousands. I mean, you're in like a tree of complexity. You can start with something very simple. The simplest advice that I got from another maintainer of OpenSearch is start with doc fixes. Well, docs is something you read every day for OpenSearch because nobody remembers what parameters to use and what the query strings are. So you find a documentation and you see that there is an error in the doc. Fix it. This one is missing some. In the example, it says, when you search for something, you get these results. And if you search for something else, you get these other results. And actually, they were saying the same thing. It was just a bad copy-paste. So just say what it's supposed to say. First contribution, contributed to documentation, way on the path of becoming a maintainer. OpenSearch has these very complex repos, and it has very simple repos, and it has these meta repos. This is a good concept for those that want to dive into the project and learn where they can contribute. So there's tons of places other than documentation where you can contribute content and not contribute actual code, and these are all very valuable ways of contribute. So use this well-organized project structure and the files that are around to make your contributions. The first and the most obvious one, every time you go to GitHub to any repo, what you see is a README. Now, that README is written by humans, and that README has typos, and it has errors, and it's poorly organized. Start there. Fix a broken link in the README. Pretty easy. This is just a typo fix. There's developer guides. If you read the README, it tells you how to use the project, what it is. It doesn't actually tell you how to get set up to run YAML REST tests that I showed you in the beginning. But the developer guide does. So as soon as you open the developer guide, and you find that this developer guide was written by a previous developer, which related to the state of the project maybe last month. Well, update it to the current situation, which may have changed since then. Here's a fix of somebody who updated the developer guide after trying to run whatever instructions were there. Just don't leave it with errors. Pretty easy. We have these meta repos. We have one for plugins. We have one for clients. And these say things that are true across multiple repos. So we have 13 plugins in OpenSearch. We have another 13 plugins in OpenSearch dashboards. We have 8 clients, one for every language. So meta repos is a great way to find what needs to be done or what ideas that apply to all clients. For example, we were adding some feature to every single client, or maybe we were adding user guides to all the clients. So that's where you find these things. And these meta repos is also where there's this .github repo. That's the one you see when you go to the OpenSearch Project organization. That's a great and scary place to contribute because everybody sees that right away. That's literally the first thing you see. It's the profile page that's up there. But that .github repository has a lot of common things that then spread out across all the repos. So, while these apply to everything, sometimes these things have words that do need updating. And so here's somebody who updated the responsibilities MD, which is the maintainer responsibilities, which I invite you to read. And they said, part of the responsibilities, is to take care of documentation and things like that. There's a license text and a notice. Don't modify those. Don't contribute to those. We usually don't change those. But there's an important one that's code of conduct. And I love the contribution that was made to the code of conduct because it's one that talks about events. And it is that, you should be abiding by the code of conduct at the events. And that was a very important and missing piece of information that somebody who runs events has put in there, and that's a great way on the path of becoming a maintainer to the project. Of course, there is the contributing MD that talks about how to contribute to the projects en général. That's another thing that you'd want to read. So here's a modification of the contributing MD, and it says update the documentation changes section of contributing MD because we need documentation, and part of contributing is contributing to the documentation, as you've seen that other example. So good places to contribute. And finally, there's this document called maintainers MD, and that lists today's maintainers of every repos. It's literally the list of the people that are current maintainers. So if you want to reach out to the people maintaining, like here they are. And that one is also being updated regularly with new maintainers. We're going to get there. So here's another meta repo for clients and plugins. And here's some contributions that were made to that repo. This one is conventions to include API parameters and field naming. So this is something that it would like to have common across all plugins. And somebody decided to take on themselves to do something that applies to every single plugin across the board. That's like maintain a type job for many repos. You don't have to. You can have really big ideas, but contribute code to only some of the things. This is a proposal that I wrote a while ago. There was a lot of people using OpenSearch that wanted to make raw requests to OpenSearch from clients, meaning they didn't want to write client.info, client.search. They wanted to send raw JSON. Why would they want that? It's because the clients sometimes lag the server. So if the server has a new API, a new parameter, then you have to wait till the next release of the client to get the support for the higher level API. So sometimes you just want to call something that's not supported in the client yet. And turns out that our clients did not have the possibility to make these raw JSON requests from all of them. Some did, some didn't. So I thought, this is something that we'd want in all the clients. So I wrote a meta issue that said, I'd like that feature everywhere. And if you notice, it's open right now on my screenshot there. There's links to every client, and there's one that was missing. So different people contributed different things. Different people who who maybe know Go or know Java, know PHP, went and contributed this feature in their respective clients. There was one missing that got closed a few days ago and is being released right now, as well. So you can go find these meta issues that have something across many languages, many clients, many plugins, and just go from there to find something to contribute to. So here's the this is the one of the contributions in one of the clients. So you can see how I made a proposal that expands all the clients, it's super big, but I didn't actually know that this was going to be a thing that will get adopted by all the clients. So I didn't come there to contribute something big. I didn't know that was going to be so impactful. Don't worry about how big the contribution is. You can contribute something very small, like a doc fix, like a typo, and it's extremely valuable. It might grow into something bigger over time. So one of the great places where you can start really small and go bigger and it's super not scary, is user guides and samples. And user guides and samples are useful to everyone, and you can do something very incremental, which is, you learned how to use a feature in OpenSearch, and then you go to a sample and write a sample for that feature if it doesn't exist. The next time somebody wants to write that feature, they will read the documentation, they'll have a working sample. And here's an example of a contribution where someone added a guide and a sample of how to use a logger in OpenSearch Pi. And it turns out this is something that everybody keeps looking for. Like, how do I enable logging in the client? And it's dug in the documentation, but there was no working example. Adding this to the guide was very valuable. And let me tell you, I love samples. Samples are a wonderful thing because you can do whatever you want in the samples. Nobody will argue whether it's valuable or not valuable. If it's possible, you can put it in a sample. Nobody will say, like, no, your sample is wrong. It's a sample. It does something it does. It can be valuable to anyone. So samples have no boundaries. And so when I was adding the SIGV4 signing to some of the clients, I didn't write most of the SIGV4 code. Different people did. But I thought I'd learn how I wanted to learn how it's done in various programming languages. I had never done Rust, and I have not done PHP since like 1974. And I thought maybe I can write a sample and see like what these modern things look like today. So I wrote myself a personal Java client example of how to use OpenSearch Java. Then I wrote another one of how to use OpenSearch Ruby, and so on and so forth. By the end of the day, and I mean more like a month, I had a sample for every single OpenSearch client. And I use these all the time. When somebody reports a bug, often I'll just open my working client, my working sample, and just modify that with the example and run it against the service. It's all set up. It's already ready to go. It's my personal samples that I used for reproducing problems. And a lot of this code ends up being upstreamed because it's valuable for everyone. I've written enough samples to collect them in themed blog posts. And that's actually another way to contribute that I really like. I always finish something by writing a blog post on my personal blog about it. So this JSON raw requests, I have a blog post that just says, this is how you do it with OpenSearch clients. And it has links to every single client with examples for every single one. So there's nowhere to put this type of documentation because we tend to have docs per client. We don't have this one place where we would say, here's how you do something with OpenSearch in every programming language. That would be a little bit weird for the documentation, unless maybe one day the documentation can be restructured in a way where we can like switch, do a drop down and change the language. But this is kind of that idea without going and changing all the documentation at once, because that would be a lot of work. But maybe it can grow into something like that. So you can see this incremental approach of starting small is a really good advice. Another really good advice is don't come to change everything. People who look at those who come to change everything, they tend not to trust large changes because maybe they don't know if you're any good. They don't know if this is a good idea. Small changes incrementally are better than one giant change. And usually, big changes is also not the area in which the existing maintainers are struggling the most, because you can imagine you've been working on something for a long time, and somebody comes and says it's all wrong, delete it all. This is not a very good opening to be contributing. So the easiest change to help maintainers without coming like a hurricane is CI/CD. You go to this README, and there is a broken CI/CD link. So fix it. This one actually, the CI/CD was not broken at all. It's the badge that was broken. Fix the badge, or upgrade the GitHub Actions to the next version. Super innocent, easy change that now Dependabot does that a lot. Dependabot, big contributor. But sometimes it's not set up, and so you can do this by hand. Or do something more complicated, upgrade Gradle. I know one maintainer that upgrades Gradle all over the place all the time. He would be so happy if more people just went and did Gradle upgrades so that he doesn't have to. That'd be amazing. But you know what? Code does talk. And sometimes you do want to arrive and eventually become a hurricane. So here's a hurricane for somebody who suggested rewriting the Go client. And I mean rewriting the Go client. And you know what? After many, many contributions to the Go client, they came and they rewrote the Go client. And this was a change that took a while. 583 files have been changed, and it took 78 commits to go and make this change. This is a huge change, and you bet this person who has contributed to the Go client is a maintainer of the Go client today. I mean, he wrote the Go client. So this advice of how to get to a place like this is be consistent. Keep going, keep contributing a little bit over time. This is what consistent looked like for this contribution. Step by step, one commit, one feature, one feature, one feature, one feature. Eventually you realize that maybe everything needs to change in a bigger way. You now have earned the trust of the existing maintainers. But we're kind of sitting here and imagining ideas of where you could contribute. There's nothing better than scratching your own itch. So you probably are using OpenSearch in a certain way. You are the customer of this product. You are the user of this product. So just start by being a user of a particular repository. So what does that look like? Here's an engineer that who I polled recently, and I said, I noticed you came and started contributing to this repo out of the blue. Like, where do you come from? Why did you do this? And he said, I just work for a big company, lots of people. Do you guys know where this big company, lots of people is from? No, it's Steve Ballmer. Microsoft, where I had the chance to work many moons ago, has this app called Vesting, which tells you how much money you make depending on how high the stock price is. And it's an internal open source, shared source tool that somebody wrote. But every time that on different time intervals, it would run a recording by Steve Ballmer, who said, we're a big company, lots of people. So you walk in the corridors of the offices, and occasionally some computer who has the speaker on would say, big company, lots of people. So this is where this is from. So this person works for another big company with lots of people. And of course, they work on something super confidential, which I don't want to know what that is. But it just happens that this product is in the critical path of their job. And they wanted to make a change because they needed it. That's a great way to start contributing. Effectively, you're being paid to do open source work. It's an amazing combination of the two. So having a real need, being a user, a customer of this repository, being paid for the job, which turns into contributions to the code, is probably the most consistent, the best way to do it. So, they came and they made the commit, and it was very valuable because it fixed their particular problem. When you start like this, you have a good reason, but you also need to have a strong reason to be actively engaged. The one that I like is from another small company with very few people, and this company was completely unknown for a while, and it's a startup called Aaron. I can mention them here. And so they were experimenting with OpenSearch early to see if it could build their if it's something you could use to build their business. And the first attempt at a contribution was a total fail. This was, the engineer ran into a problem trying to set something up, tried to fix it, totally didn't work. The contribution was rejected, there was sent back packing, the maintainers were like, this doesn't work, and so they didn't get discouraged. They just continued. Fast forward many moons later, they are the main contributor for the conversational RAG system in ML Commons, and that's pretty big, and you bet they're maintained today. So there's if there's one advice from that we can get from that is build things that are valuable. Build something that somebody else needs. How do you know that somebody else needs it? Will you go and contribute a RAG system to ML Commons from scratch? That seems like a lot of work before you think that somebody else needs it. I mean, it's nice. I like to build things that I actually prefer to build things that nobody needs because this way the bugs are never found. But it's probably better if the software is actually used. Sometimes you don't know, so there are other ways to contribute. You can post RFCs. A request for comments is a proposal. And it just says, I think the OpenSearch should do blah. And it's better if you don't just come and say, I think I have this brilliant idea of a feature. Maybe you want to draw a picture of how that could work. Maybe even a technical design, which is what this RFC has. And then, of course, you want to write the code if you can, but not always. Other people can pick up and write the code. Go at your own pace. You're not in a rush. There's no deadline. OpenSearch Project is there for the long run, optimized for the long term. Go at the pace that is your own. And it's really, the slow and steady really wins the race. There's a contribution that's up there that's been taking quite some time. It's a really technically complicated one. It's adding a new transport protocol to OpenSearch. First, it was a POC. Then there were some proposals about how it could be actually put into the code base. Not something quick and dirty. We have to go and do a bunch of refactoring. And finally, it's actually a deep refactor into OpenSearch Core, piecemeal. And that's a really hard one. But the engineer is hanging on. It's been quite some time. And she's now committing changes steadily, refactoring the core engine, which is very much a maintainer, future maintainer type behavior that everybody loves to see. Switching gears a little bit, don't feel like you want to solve issues of others all the time and try to be extra helpful. Scratch a little bit your own itch. But one way you can be less helpful and still helpful is to help those reporting issues help themselves. And this is something anybody can do. So this is a user that reported a bug. I probably could have spent a day or two fixing the bug. I decided this is not in the path of where I want to spend my time, but I'm going to help them and just maybe ask them to do the next step. I showed you how to help somebody do the next step with something very clear. This is very unclear. So I pointed them to where in code to add some lines so they can get maybe a little bit of logging. And they went and did that, got some other logs. I pointed them to the next steps, what to do. So help others help themselves. That's very much a maintainer behavior. If you don't know where to start, try to learn what others are doing. I love this advice. How do you know what others are doing? Well, you're here at this conference. This is a good place to know what everybody is working on. You can go attend a public meeting. There's a bunch of those on Meetup and OpenSearch.org. So there's OpenTriage. Those are really cool. OpenTriage just looks at all the new issues that were opened in a repo and discusses them. This looks like a bug. This doesn't belong here. Oh, this is a cool feature. Let's add a comment. Let's try to move this thing forward. So public triage is a great way to know what things are doing. And if you're an introvert like me and you don't like to participate in group activities, you can do some of it yourself. So the way I know what other people are doing is that I subscribe to GitHub notifications, and then I label them automatically. Every time I subscribe to a new repo, I put it under a new label. And so now I have many hundreds of GitHub repo labels over the years that I've amassed. And so I create this rule, and then I go and occasionally read notifications in bulk. So I have this like OpenSearch -build repo that I don't look at all the time. But once a week, I'll go and just read all the notifications there, like next, 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 next. That's one way, a little bit OCD, of knowing what is going on in another repo. I organize my GitHub notifications by repo. It's a good way for me. And so sometimes you can just see something that's interesting you and just go dive into it. If you don't know, if you have a question about something, just ask it. Here's some good examples of people asking questions. And then help others come back to, if you're already contributing to a repo, just say thanks to people when they are contributing to something. If you are using a feature that someone wrote and you found that pull request or that issue, just go and say thanks. Thank you for contributing this. Make others feel welcome. That's very much a maintainer behavior. I love this. Like somebody said, just this is awesome. Thank you. If you don't want to work with others, which I totally understand, sometimes the best way to become a maintainer is just to make something new. You had an idea, you wrote it, boom, you're a maintainer. So there is a way to start plugins, make a plugin. I wrote one called OpenSearch API. You want a demo of some new feature of OpenSearch that is a plugin, make it. I'm a maintainer of my own plugin. Nobody's interested in my plugin, maybe after this talk. So let's see. We have about 113 repos last time I checked. And this advice has been used by 245 people who became maintainers on OpenSearch Project, out of which about 39 do not work for Amazon. I think these are good stats. We're growing really fast maintainers who didn't come with a fork, who had the job of making the fork, and had the job of maintaining, being the initial spark of getting the project off the ground. We have a lot of people who are now, who came to the project because their business needed, because they wanted to contribute, and so on and so forth. And so I'm really excited that we have about a third of the repositories actively co-maintained by community members. I think that's awesome. And I hope to stand here in next year and tell you that that number has doubled. So quickly recapping all this advice. Start from being the customer, have a strong reason to be engaged, dive in, contribute small, don't come in and change everything at once, write some code. Code will talk, build things that are valuable, make something new, have fun. But one thing I didn't tell you is how to actually become a maintainer. All this is good advice. All this is kind of circling around the thing. But when is the moment when you actually become the maintainer? Well, becoming a maintainer is just a formality. If you've been doing all these things, there's a nomination process, most of which you don't see. Basically, existing maintainers notice someone who is doing a great job at contributing and acting like a maintainer, and they send an email to each other. Somebody says, hey, I think this contributor has just rewritten all of OpenSearch Go, so maybe they should be a maintainer of this project. And everybody else says, yep, or nope. And I have not seen somebody say, absolutely not, in forever. So then they all agree with a simple majority vote. Any maintainer can veto that. That's the process. And then they just invite the person and say, hey, you've done this awesome work. We'd love for you to join us as a maintainer. You accept, and as soon as you accept, you get more work. One of the typical things that we ask people to do is to make the next release of the project, for example. What you see in the public PR when somebody has become a maintainer is usually a little summary of what they've done so that as a community we have the trust in this process. So here is a new maintainer for OpenSearch Core who's written a bunch of features and a bunch of code, who's participated in tons of issues, who's followed his own advice, and has come to triage meetings and has really improved the quality of other people's contributions by commenting and reviewing their code. And so, of course, why wouldn't this person be a co-maintainer of the project? They completely earned the trust. OK, I said I had lots of advice, and that will be the last one. There's one more piece of advice that I did not give. And that one comes directly from Jerry, our art critic. And Jerry drinks 3 cups of coffee a day. And so my last piece of advice, when you are on your path to becoming a maintainer in an OpenSearch project, please drink more coffee. It will definitely help you. Thank you. I think we have a minute for questions.
We got time for questions. Anyone have any questions?
Great talk, DB. As a fellow maintainer for one of the OpenSearch projects and my co-maintainers over there, this is more of an open-ended question, but what do you recommend as like a compelling reason why someone should be a maintainer? That is some of the questions we got asked when we added more maintainers to our project.
Good question of why should one be a maintainer at all. I think it's just like making art. I don't know why I want to. I just keep making it. And that's probably not a compelling reason to be a maintainer. I enjoy that type of work, and I still don't understand why, because it's more work. I have to deal with more people. This feels difficult, you know. But I would say, if I look at this from a practical point of view, being an open source contributor and maintainer has definitely helped my career in a big way. I was an early contributor to Java Native Access and then became the project maintainer. I learned a ton. And then this is something that helped me figure out how I wanted to run my own team in a startup where I worked for 8 years. It has grown me and identified with me over my career. It's definitely why I have a job in the OpenSearch project at Amazon today. I'm very passionate about open source because I think it's the best way and the cheapest way to write software. And so being a maintainer is the manifestation of those activities that I like to do anyway. And so it creates the dopamine cycle for me. Every time I contribute, every time I help someone, it makes me happier. And I think that's a pretty good reason to do it. I just feel very compelled to do it. And then it has all these side effects for my career and such. Anybody else?
Yeah, that was a great talk, DB. So many years ago, when I was working on proprietary software, I got hold of a open source maintainer. He was a maintainer on many projects and asked for his advice. I think many of his nuggets of wisdom are similar to what you had talked about, but I think this is the first time I've seen that all in a presentation, so that's great. So with regard to becoming a maintainer, I think one of the good points you raised was starting with something simple, documentation, doing work with adding new issues, doing CI/CD and so on. So many people, I think, might be overwhelmed, as you said, with the complexity of OpenSearch core, for example. So by doing these other activities and being a regular contributor, I think it's possible for people to become maintainers on OpenSearch, because I think the policies vary from repository and project to project. So it looks like OpenSearch is pretty welcoming to people as maintainers, from what I understand.
So are you asking what the bar is across the projects? Yeah, it really is different, and it varies because there's no one bar. When I start a project, I'm its maintainer by default. So my bar is extremely low. My bar is like what I see in the mirror. I don't need to ask anybody, right? On a project that has one maintainer, or that may have been abandoned for whatever reason, maybe the people have moved on and don't work for it, the bar to becoming a maintainer is extremely low. I merged a pull request from someone on a project that I co-maintained since, I don't know, 15 years ago, that's barely seen any activity. And my first question to this person is, would you like to be a maintainer of this project? Because we need another release, and I am not even using this, but I'm happy to pass the baton. And this has been, the maintainers have moved on. So the bar is whatever it is of existing maintainers. And the projects would love nothing less than, or nothing more than for you to go and become a maintainer of the projects, because it's less work for the existing maintainers. So yes, the projects are very welcoming, and they really want you. And some are very complex. So you're probably not going to become a co-maintainer of OpenSearch core without writing significant amounts of distributed system code. That's unlikely. Why? Because it's not because the project is not welcoming. It's simply because part of the maintainer job is reviewing and merging other people's commits. And we rely on the expertise of people when you review a PR that's 10,000 lines of distributed system code, there's probably not going to be another pair of eyes looking at this for a while. And so we really need the maintainer to understand what's going on in the system to click that merge button and to comment in a meaningful way. But so yeah, OpenSearch Core, I've seen people become maintainers like in about a year of work in OpenSearch Core full time. It's difficult. I'm by the way, I'm a maintainer in OpenSearch Core, but more I think from the fork, because I worked on a lot of the infrastructure, than from this distributed system knowledge. I probably would not qualify to being an OpenSearch Core maintainer today I've written Java code in there, but not a lot. I think it's a difficult project to be. Thank you.